Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to both of you to the 9/11 Commission. You have both playfully insulted lawyers in the last 10 or 15 minutes. I'm not a lawyer. I don't care. You've got 6 lawyers following me in the questions. You might want to say something nice in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Just a little bit of advice to you for the next few minutes. You two are certainly squarely in the hot seat. We have staff statements and the joint inquiry report that has roundly and deeply systemically criticized the FBI and the CIA for their performances leading up to 9/11. They have cited problems in sharing communication, connecting the dots, overclassifying documents, and glitches and failures to protect the seams. I have a question for both of you to just go at maybe one of the problems. I asked Director Free, Mr. Pickard, earlier about the active informant who had engaged 2 of the 19 hijackers, and he said, quite frankly, the FBI should have done better. Let me give you a case and get your response from it. You have said in your remarks that that was the most serious chatter in the summer of 2001. When we have talked to some of the people that should have heard this serious chatter and your communication with them leading into the spring and the summer, when a big event was going to happen, an experienced terrorism supervisor in the Washington office, 6 blocks from headquarters, 6 blocks away, says he was not aware of any heightened terrorist threat. His squad took no special action leading up to 9/11. A supervisor in the Miami field office, a special agent in charge, said this was inside the Beltway kind of thing. Never heard of that chatter until after 9/11. What happened?
Your staff has put together some of the communications we sent out. I was concerned of making sure that we were at maximum capacity, maximum effort on that. I personally had a conference call with all 56 SACs and all the assistant directors on July 19th, just to make sure that I know some people don't read everything that comes out, but just to reinforce that. I had all 56 SACs. I can't account for the SAC in Miami as to whether he was actually on the call, but whoever was in charge of the office that day was on that call, because I did not get on it until they were all on it. During that call, I reiterated the issue of the threat level and also to make sure they were at their maximum effort on that. I don't know.
Do you recall your precise words that you recently told the 9/11 Commission on that conversation? Your words to the 9/11 Commission were evidence response teams ready. Evidence response. That's reactive. That's not proactive, saying, here's the threat, here's what you need to do about it. You're saying, if we get hit, have the evidence response teams ready. That's what you told the 9/11 Commission staff.
I had a very brief conversation with them about that. I was surprised at the brevity of it.
Well, it sounds like it was pretty brief to the field offices as well. Response, not active threat.
But I also I spoke to each of the 56 SACs during the month of July, between July 9th and July 31st. Each of them individually, I had them on the phone, secure conference call with the assistant directors from counterterrorism, Dale Watson, counterintelligence, Neil Gallagher, and the assistant director of the criminal division, Ruben Garcia. We discussed their performance, and in addition to that hour-and-a-half discussion of their performance in their field office and their commitment to the counterintelligence and counterterrorism efforts, we also discussed, during that phone call, the threat level. I don't know why the SAC in Miami did not get it. I spoke to him on July 18th.
Your supervisor 6 blocks away didn't get it.
I spoke to the SACs. They should have been working that information down.
So could you have done a better job, or are you just saying, I don't know why they didn't hear it? Did you task them again after the 19th?
I don't understand why they didn't hear it. I spoke to each of them individually, as I said, and in addition, I had the communications out to them. I don't know what more I could have done. Some people, I don't understand whether they can't recall it or not. But if you talk to, for example, I know the staff, the New York office agents, they got it. They were always on top of it. And many of the other agents that I've spoke to over the last week.
When we as you read in the staff statement, when we tasked out to the field, if all those offices were on high alert and doing their maximum effort, I think we got 9 out of 10 back saying they weren't at maximum effort. They weren't at war footing. Mr. Black, let me ask you, your folks did a very professional job following people into Kuala Lumpur to a meeting of known, suspected thugs, terrorists, murderers. Then, after the meeting of a couple days in Kuala Lumpur, they leave, 3 of them leave, and go to Bangkok. You fail to follow those 3 people. To me, that's like a sheriff in a local town finding some people on the border of Indiana that are suspected murderers, letting them go across the border in Michigan, and not alerting anybody that they're on their way. What happened? Where did we let down the guard here from Kuala Lumpur to Bangkok that then let 2 of these hijackers into the United States?
The activity covering these people in Kuala Lumpur was pretty comprehensive. We were concerned about their actions. We were able to conduct photography.
I said you did a good job
there. It played
there.
out later, so that worked out pretty well. What happened was that when the targets departed Kuala Lumpur and went to Bangkok, that the advisory information, the alert to the people downrange in Bangkok did not arrive in time to put coverage upon the targets upon arrival. Got there late. The targets went out into the community and working with our friends locally as a priority operational activity, we tried to find these people. So we were looking for them in the interim, and the next sign of life that we identified of these targets, unfortunately, was looking at, I think, airport departure cards, something like that, some physical evidence that they had departed, and then that information was reported cable traffic, which is another part of the story.
So a couple months later, you find out that they've departed Bangkok and are in the United States.
That's correct. With looking, with these things, having a good partnership with our friends, looking to try and find these people, we were able to find evidence of them. Bangkok, I'm sure you've been there, it's a big town. We found evidence that they had departed, and this information was communicated. That took place in March. So they had come and they had gone, with us being able to know that until we came up with the departure cards, and that was the status of it.
Mr. Pickard, what's important for me to try to understand as well is in your role at the number 2 position at the FBI and acting director, I'm interested in knowing what you were telling the highest government officials, briefing them about the threat leading into the spring and the summer of 2001. Did you ever have the opportunity to brief the President of the United States on counterterrorism issues?
No, I did not.
Did you ever ask to do that?
No, I did not.
Did you ever brief the Vice President of the United States on counterterrorism?
Yes, I did.
How many times did you brief the Vice President?
I recall one time that he came over to FBI headquarters on March 16th. I believe he came another time, but I was not present. I did not personally do the briefing. Director Free and Assistant Director Watson did them.
And did you brief the Vice President on an al-Qaeda presence in the United States?
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
He was surprised that al-Qaeda was here in the United States, as was the Attorney General. We told him we had coverage on him, and as I explained earlier, we also have Hamas, Hezbollah, many other terrorist groups. We also have intelligence agents from foreign countries here in the United States. With the laws and regulations we have, We try to utilize anything we can to thwart their efforts, but if they haven't crossed the line, if they haven't done something illegal, we don't have an opportunity to do anything with them.
Did the Vice President task you with any kind of undertaking to do something about the al-Qaeda presence?
Not that I recall.
Didn't ask you to arrest him? Didn't ask you to,
Vice President, and
Vice
he
President?
had very few comments.
And are you sure that that was the Vice President's reaction, according to what you said to the 9/11 Commission staff?
I think you're referring to what the Attorney General said.
No, I know what I'm going to ask you about what the Attorney General said.
As I recall, the Vice President at the end of the meeting had 3 points. I recall the point about the computer systems of the FBI. I don't recall the other 2.
So he did say 2 or 3 things to you.
Right.
Did he follow up with you in the spring and summer when the warning was getting bigger and bigger about the al-Qaeda presence?
I believe he
that
had
was
another
worried about
meeting
that?
with Director Free, but I was not at it
In the spring or the summer?
in the spring. Director Free retired from the FBI about June 22nd.
Well, I'd certainly like to follow up with you a bit more on that particular topic, as you recollect those 3 items. Did you brief the National Security Advisor to the President, Dr. Rice, on counterterrorism?
Shortly after Dr. Rice came in, Director Free and I went up and met with her and Steve Hadley and briefed her on both counterintelligence and counterterrorism issues.
And how specific were you on counterterrorism issues? Did you generally brief her on counterterrorism? Was it specifically on al-Qaeda and bin Laden?
It wasn't specifically on them. It was the whole counterintelligence and counterterrorism program of the FBI.
And this is in February 2001?
I believe it was January 26th.
January 26th is one of the meetings. I believe you also briefed her in February on Cofer Towers.
That's correct.
So you had 2.
Yeah, at least 2.
And did bin Laden come up in the second briefing?
No, it didn't.
Okay. You sure?
Yes. It was specifically on Cofer Towers because we were running towards the end of the statute of limitations on it, which was June 25th.
Okay. Well, again, I'd like to talk to you about that in terms of your comments to the staff. Did you brief the Attorney General on terrorism?
Yes, I did.
And how many times did you brief him on terrorism?
After Director Free left the FBI, the Attorney General had me come in on June 22nd to meet with him, and he appointed me as the acting director of the FBI. And then on June 28th, I had a meeting with the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and I believe his Chief of Staff was in parts of that meeting, as well as Assistant Director Garcia from
So
the
what
FBI.
would you guess, Mr. Pickard? How many times did you brief?
At least 3 times.
3 times. And what were the Attorney General's priorities with respect to terrorism? Was it a top-tier priority for the Attorney General?
It was a top tier for the FBI. The Attorney General on May 10th issued budget guidance for us, and I did not see that as a top item on his agenda.
How did you take that to the Attorney General, that you were concerned that that was not a top item for him? And is this the $58 million that you're concerned about?
No, that was later. This was
So
the
these
budget
are-
guidance that came out on May 10th. During the summer of 2001, the FBI submitted what I believe was our 2003 budget proposal. That proposal came back, and the additional funds that we were looking for on counterterrorism were denied. I spoke to the Attorney General briefly and asked him if I could appeal it, and he told me yes, I could, put it in writing. I had our finance and counterterrorism people put together an appeal of that decision, and then on September 12th, I read the denial of that appeal from the Attorney General.
So you had a May 10th memo on the Attorney General's priorities that you objected to, and then you had a meeting in August where you personally appealed to the Attorney General and received a letter from him saying no to the increases that you received on what date?
I received that on September 12th, that denial.
So what does this say about counterterrorism as a priority for the Attorney General? Do you think it was not the priority that you hoped it would be, commensurate with the FBI's?
I only had the perspective to see it from my view of the FBI. I don't know all that the Attorney General had to look at with the 100,000 employees of the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just got a couple of questions. During the summer of 2001, the Minneapolis office had Moussaoui detained. And they were concerned that he might be part of a larger plot. Were you aware of his detention and aware of his
No, I was not.
Were you aware of those concerns any time before September 11th?
No, I was not.
The New York office began searching for El Hazmi and El Midar, knew that they're in the country and was searching for them that same summer.
Right.
Were you aware of that?
No, I was not before September 11th.
Do you think if those two matters from those different officers had been brought to your attention, do you think you might have thought a little differently about the plot, or whether there was a plot, or you might have acted differently based on those pieces of information?
I've thought long and hard about that, Governor, it's a frightening thought to think that that could have been on my desk on September 10th, and would I have done something differently or not? And I can't answer that. I go back and forth on that constantly. It keeps me up at night thinking, if I had that information, would I have had the intuitiveness to recognize, to go to the president, to do something different?
What bothers me is just the fact it didn't get to you. You know, that something in the FBI stopped those very two important pieces of information, one from different parts of the country, from rising to the kind of level where you might have seen them and might have acted on them.
Governor, in defense of the employees there, they were getting, one of the unit chiefs, at least 100 pieces of information a day. They were getting fed from a fire hydrant and trying to sort through those things. I spoke recently with the individual who was in charge of the Minneapolis office, and he said, I asked him, I said, why didn't you call me? I said, you know me. I send once a year out an email to all FBI employees to tell them to come to me with any issue that you have, whether it's investigative, administrative, your pay, or some other problem. And I heard frequently from individuals who said, I can't get a Group 1 undercover operation through, or I'm not getting my annual leave corrected, or whatever it might be. And my secretary used to kid me about it, because she'd print it out each night and say, here's your homework, do it tonight and bring it back tomorrow morning, because I don't type. Those things bothered me, but those employees working down in the counterterrorism division were working very hard. They were trying to do the best they could with the hundreds of pieces of information they could. And as we sit here with 20/20 hindsight, picking out 3 or 4 pieces of information, I think is a disservice to them to recognize what pieces in light of 9/11 were relevant.